can you break down GMO? And when you were talking about it, I'm like, now that sounds like that makes sense, and it's not unhealthy to take this characteristic out, etc. So
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. So, formally, genetic modification is when you take a foreign gene and put it into a plant or a crop, right? So when you think of GM soy, that often has like pest resistance or insecticide resistance genes in it, which
Yeah.
makes those plants easier to grow. They can spray more insecticide on. There's both positives and negatives to that. That's kind of classical GM technology.
Or doesn't
What
that
you're
mean they can spray less because it's genetically modified to be resistant to the bugs, so they
the,
don't have to
the
spray
crop
themselves?
itself is, but then because what they're trying to do is get rid of all the weeds and stuff around it, right? So they pile on the pesticides and insecticides and the plant is more tolerant, the soy is more tolerant to the higher levels of insecticide.
Okay.
So, I mean, that there's a lot of both. I think there are valid concerns about that, but there's a lot of misinformation around all of that. But if we put that to the side, what's happened in the last 10 years on the sort of editing or engineering front, as it's called, is, well, you might have heard of CRISPR, this technology that was discovered, I think, a little bit over a decade ago. The two scientists that discovered it, they won the Nobel Prize, and this allows very precise edits in the genome of a crop or a microbe, and this is very different to the sort of old-fashioned GM technologies where you're just taking a big piece of DNA from something else and putting it inside. Here, you're making very sort of surgical changes to the genome that could happen in nature as well over time. So I think of this type of technology as really just an accelerant of what could happen in nature or through classical breeding methods. And I think this is a really exciting area of biotechnology that's being applied to medicine, but also to food as well. And some of the companies that we support are using this technology to create better crops or better microbes or animal cells, which are in those other technologies that we didn't get to yet. But hopefully that helps you and the viewers better understand GMO and gene editing and breeding. I think, like any technology, they can be used for both good things and bad things. And I think, fortunately, in the food industry today, I think these technologies are being used primarily for good, which is great. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. And as far as soy goes, that they are making them more resistant to bugs. And so then they're also resistant to sprayers. What's bad about that, if anything, doing that to the soy?
I mean, what it allows the industry to do is grow soy more efficiently.
Right. I meant to our health. Like, is there any?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Yeah.
I think that there is, and this is definitely not an area of expertise for me, but there have been concerns about, large amounts of pesticide glyphosate being in certain farming areas and that contributing to negative health. I don't think that there's a lot of data to conclusively prove that. I could be wrong, but at least everything that I've read doesn't point to glyphosate being the sort of the evil that it's put out to be. But I think it's important that we have more discussions about the use of these types of insecticides. And I think there's more studies that need to be done, right? I think these resistant crops were kind of just rolled out without a lot of studies. And I think some of the practices that were done by these big seed companies with farmers, not even talking about the health side, but just how they kind of forced farmers to use these seeds. I think there were a lot of less good things that happened when these technologies were originally introduced. I don't know if I couldn't tell you, .c, that I'm with 100% certainty that all of these pesticides and insecticides are healthy. I think that the amount that's used today is generally safe, but I think more studies should be done for sure. More long-term health studies on these should be done.
But the problem is not the genetic modification. The problem is because they've genetically modified,
exactly.
Now they can handle, and be more resistant to all the glyphosate. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's an important delineation, I feel like.
And one
Yeah,
other issue is that GMO crops are owned often by the
exactly.
company. And so farmers then are sold these GMO seeds. They're not allowed to use the seeds that come from those plants. They have to buy new ones, is my understanding. And if, for example, some of your seeds blow over into your neighbor and they end up having crops that happen to have this same GMO configuration, they can be sued by the company for growing crops that they don't, quote unquote, own. It really takes away the power from the farmer. And in my opinion, insecticides, it's better to not kill insects, so let's work with the land. And so I have a big issue with all the ability of these plants to withstand insecticides so that the companies can just spray huge amounts to get rid of the plants they don't want, which are maybe not good for their business, but are very good for the planet and the balance. And insects are so important that just killing them like that, to me, it just has a lot of questions about
Yeah.
what we're doing. And I think there we should really be careful.